everyone. I'm Wendell Jones. I'm the ambassador to the United States of America. We are here in this conversation with members of the Bahamian diaspora. I've been in the United States now representing the Bahamas for the last year, and I've had the good fortune of speaking with a number of Bahamians from all walks of life who are making significant contributions here in the United States of America. And today on our program, on this webinar, as we talk to these Bahamians, we do so cognizant of the fact that there are many who are in the United States planning for the 50th anniversary of the independence of the Bahamas. There are going to be a number of events throughout the United States, and we are calling on members of the diaspora, wherever they are, to participate in these events. The consuls general in the various jurisdictions are doing an excellent job, and so in association with the officers here in the embassy in Washington, D.C., we are pleased to announce those who are participating in our conversation today. We are pleased to have David Woodside, who is in Palm Beach, Florida. He is Assistant Fire Marshal there, and he has been awarded given many awards for outstanding services, and he is also on the faculty of Palm Beach State College and South Tech Educational College. We also have Ann Bain, who is a research advisor, medical chemist, and she is in Indiana. James Peter Davil, who is an independent contractor, who is living in Houston, Texas, and has been engaged in diaspora activities in Houston. We are pleased to have Reverend Jerome Pratt, who is the senior pastor of Zion Baptist Church in Virginia. He's a supervisor at the nuclear station dealing with policy matters. Debbie Ferguson, who is an Olympian. She is assistant coach, and she is coaching sprints and track and field at the University of Kentucky. We have Carlisle Mott, who is a principal financial planner with Carlisle Mott Financial in Texas. And so we are pleased to have all of them here today. Peter Davil, the independent contractor who I mentioned, he said that he's going to ask me some questions as well. Well, I hope not. Welcome to this conversation. And we are so pleased to see you all. And we hope that we can engage you in conversation on national development in the Bahamas, and for you to really tell us what you are doing in the United States. And so let's begin in the order that I mentioned your names, so that you can tell our public on what you are doing in the United States. Mr. Woodside, tell us some more about what you're doing.
I have an interesting profession because I am living my boyhood dream. As a young high schooler going to St. Augustine's College, there was this new television program called Emergency that depicted LA County paramedics Roy Gage and Roy DeSoto, Johnny Gage, and I wanted to be one of those guys. So we migrated after graduating from St. Augustine's College. We always knew we needed an education. We always knew we needed college. And Mom said, hey, we have an opportunity, and we migrated and came over to the United States. I stayed in this area. And I finally got the opportunity in 1984 to become that guy and started on the fire service then, and followed that dream. I became that paramedic that I saw on TV. But we didn't stop there. Um, we continued on where we did get the degrees, we did get the recognition, we did get the accolades, if you will, where we were credentialed as chief fire officer, executive fire officer, fire marshal, and hence moving up the chain of command and ladder here. But I would share that probably my biggest event related to home, and probably my most successful one, is back in the early 90s, and I'm going to tell you 92, 93, where we did the first EMT program in Nassau in conjunction with Doctors Hospital. And I had a friend of mine, he's from St. Lucia, and we took turns weekends going over to Nassau. We'd fly over on a Friday night. We taught class Friday all day, Saturday, half a day, Sunday, and then flew back. And I will admit at this juncture, statute of limitation has ran out, that we snuck in the equipment that we needed to train individuals to get up to that EMT standard. Otherwise, we'd be in a whole bunch of trouble and probably still trying to get it done. But anyway, the success of that group was that they flew over, they came over to the United States under the South Tech umbrella, because that's what we did the class under. And they were all certified as emergency medical technicians at the end of it. So it increased that level of professionalism and service that we had in Nassau in the Bahamas. So that was my most significant give back. And I tell you, I'm proud of that today. I still am in contact with a few of those students going back that far. And now looking back, there are a number of ambulance services in Nassau, and they have that higher level of training.
Very good. I'm glad to hear that you've given back that way to your country, the Bahamas. And I say that without reservation. And Bain, Dr. Bain, you have done extremely well in Indiana. Tell us some more about yourself.
Thank you. Definitely very new to Indiana. So I moved here last summer, so summer 2022. Right now I work at Eli Lilly and Company as a medicinal small molecule therapeutic chemist. So my day-to-day job is developing small molecules of interest for different therapeutic areas, right? So drug making in a small molecule sense. I finished my degrees because I've been in school all my life. I started school at age 3. Also graduated from SAC 2013. Then I went to COB for a year to do, my major was biology, minor in chemistry. Then I transferred over to Taylor University in 2014. And I did 3 years there, finished my chemistry bachelor's of science. And then right after that, 2 months later, I moved to Norman, Oklahoma, to do my doctoral studies in organic chemistry. And there I did more method development synthesis. And that worked really well because it's about 50% of my job now. And so, yeah, that's kind of my story. I feel like it's very short because I'm very young. But it's been a great experience for me thus far, yeah.
Do you get back to the Bahamas often?
Every chance I get. I looked up tickets this morning, so I should be there by the end of May.
Very good.
That's
my okay. James Peter Darwin.
Yes, sir.
You're an independent contractor. Tell us about what you do.
Oh, well, let me start from where I begin from where I started. I started at CIBC Bank in Freeport. Then I moved to Atlanta back in 1975. And I was hoping to get back into banking in the US, but I joined a hotel and I worked my way from a night audit clerk up to financial controller. And I've been in the hotel business ever since. I left the hotel business back in 1998. I opened my own travel agency. And then I closed that down and moved to Thailand for 3 years. And then we came back. And so with my agency, I am now a independent contractor with Direct Travel because the clients that I had when I had my agency still want me to do their travel. So that's what I do for them.
Mm.
I'm involved with the group in Houston. We do the independent celebration every year. And we pretty much have about close to 300 Bahamians that we have our celebration. This year, I'm not sure how many are going to be participating because I'm hearing that everybody's going home for independence. So I don't know what we're going to do. So I'm waiting to hear from Lyndon Rose on what the plans are for this year's celebration. And that's pretty much it for now.
Well, while a whole lot of people are going home, if you're not going to the Bahamas for independence, you're going to hold the fort and you're going to make sure everything goes well here, right?
That is correct.
Very good. Very
Well,
good.
not everybody can afford to go home, and we also have a number of students here that I interact with, and we're trying to, we try to help them wherever their needs are, and we're also trying to school a lot of them on, what to do or how to operate in the U.S. A lot of them would like to go back home, but they're not sure, once they graduate, what are they going to do?
Okay.
Are opportunities there for them? And so it's an ongoing conversation.
Very good. Pastor Jerome Pratt, I told him before we began that I remember him as when we were young boys in St. John's on Meeting Street. His father, Reverend Dr. O.A. Pratt, was a mentor of mine. You are in the business of running a nuclear station. Tell us about yourself, Pastor Pratt. When you're not preaching, you are involved in running nuclear stations.
How are you, sir? Good afternoon again, and it's good to see you and to talk with my fellow Bahamians. I am the supervisor of nuclear procedures, records, policy here at Surrey Nuclear Power Station. We generate about 1,676 megawatts of power, which is able to power about 500,000 homes, or about 17% of Virginia right now. I started out in the great New Providence, Nassau, Bahamas at Jordan Prince William High School under Dr. C.W. Saunders and Bishop Simeon Hall and Bishop Winter Davis. Was able to leave Prince William and go to COB, or College of Bahamas at the time, before it became the University of the Bahamas. After leaving there, I went to Virginia Union University, where I obtained a degree in biology/chemistry and was offered the opportunity to be a nuclear chemist, which at the time I said, wow, that's exciting. Something I always wanted to do, because the amazing thing about life is I started out with a chemistry set that my mother got me when I was about 7 or 8 years old. So all I knew was I wanted to work in a lab situation, but had the opportunity to work as a supervisor of nuclear chemistry at our second site, which is in Monroe, Virginia, which is North Anna Power Station, and served in that capacity for about 10 years. So I've got about 30 years in the nuclear industry. It seemed like it was just yesterday when it started, but it's amazing how someone from an island 21/7 is now commanding policies and procedures at a nuclear power station in Virginia. So it's amazing. Then on top of that, outside of my work, I pastor the Great Zion Baptist Church, which is 163 years old this year in June. Had the opportunity to go there and back in 2003, and it's been a great journey. And this Sunday, I will be celebrating my 20th anniversary as pastor of that church. So God has been good, and it's good to be able to have those things that have been instilled in us as young men and young women growing up in the Bahamas, and apply those to our lives. And credit goes out to the Boys Brigade too, for those of you that are part of that process, because that instilled great values in me, as well as my church family at St. John's Baptist Church on Meeting Street.
Yes. Well, it's good to see you. And between dealing with a nuclear plant and the church, you are very busy indeed, aren't you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And then trying to run a business too on top of all that, paradigm for excellence. So it's amazing how we do these things, but only by the grace of God. Yes. And discipline and commitment.
Good. Debbie Ferguson McKenzie, your name is a household name in the Bahamas, and it's good to see you. And you are a coach operating at the University of Kentucky. I know you have a wonderful story to tell us about your upward mobility.
Good afternoon, everyone, and hello to everybody back at home in the Bahamas and in the U.S. I'll just briefly, since everybody kind of mentioned where they started, I have to do that because you only know your past in order to know your future. So I started at Oaksfield Primary, then went to CC Sweeting, and then got a scholarship to attend St. Andrews. Wanted to attend college, didn't know how. And then I realized I could use my talent, ability to get a scholarship. And so got a scholarship and attended University of Georgia. I'm so proud of Dr. Bain and also Pastor Pratt, because I got a degree in biology, so my Bachelor of Science. But when I graduated, I realized, okay, not sure if I could afford to go to med school or vet school. And so I fell in love with coaching and decided, well, I'm going to go pro for a few years and compete. Competed for a while. Okay. Fast forward from that, and volunteered at Miami for like 8 years, volunteered with a professional group for another 8 years, and got my first opportunity to be able to become a coach at the University of Southern Miss in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. At the time, a lot of people said, why are you going to Mississippi? And I said, why not? I like to go where I'm needed. And so that's where I started. The good Lord have it, I didn't mind staying and living in Hattiesburg, but after a year at Hattiesburg, I got hired at the University of Houston. And so I was in Houston, Texas. It was really nice being in Houston because I got a lot of the food that I missed from home, and was able to purchase a lot of stuff that you could purchase at home. And so spent 4 years at University of Houston, and then got hired in 2018 here at the University of Kentucky by Coach Lonnie Green, who's also a Bahamian. And I'm honored to be here. As I said, the rest is history.
Very good. Good to see you. Let's go to Mr. Mott Carlisle. Mott, tell us about your sojourn.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, sir. I'm glad to be here. And just a sidebar, Jeremy Pratt, I don't know, I might know you. Marker, take post. I did Boys Brigade at St. John's also. So we may have to align or realign offline. But yeah, I've been married for 30 years with 3 adult children. I put emphasis on adult, which means that they're getting off the payroll. Woohoo! And a little bit about my background. I went to primary school at C.W. Sawyer, attended St. Anne's, class of 86. Then from there, I attended COB, where I did my associates in electrical technology. While I was doing that, I worked in the maintenance department at Wyndham Cable Beach at the time. And then I came over to Texas in 1989 to UT Arlington. Then from UT Arlington, I transferred to UT Dallas, where I received my electrical engineering degree, my bachelor's in electrical engineering. So while at UT Dallas in my junior year, I started a co-op intern at Texas Instruments. And then after I graduated, I hired on full-time as a digital design engineer at Texas Instruments. So I worked on what we call ASICs, application specific integrated circuits. So for those of you who have the USB, so I was on the team that started the USB back in the mid to late 1990s, worked on a lot of peripherals, did a lot of chip design for a lot of the big names, the Sonys, a lot of the PlayStations, 1394 Firewire. And then in 2006, I pulled the plug on Texas Instruments because I've always said that at the age of 40, I wanted to be working for myself. Unfortunately, by the grace of God, at the age of 36, I left Texas Instruments and I studied and became a financial advisor. That was in 2007. That all happened right in time for the big stock market crash of 2008. Perfect timing. And then in 2012, I started my own firm, Carlisle Mart Financial. And shortly after that, another dream of mine, like I tell people here in Texas, I am in Texas, just about an hour northeast of Dallas. Everybody wants to know, well, hey, what are you doing here in Texas if you're from the Bahamas? And I say, while you're here in Texas looking at land and cattle, you dream of the beach. And when you're in the Bahamas on the beach, you dream of land and cattle. So shortly after starting my own firm, I started a cattle business. So right now I raise organic grass-fed beef master cows, and my company or my LLC is Mott Cattle Company. Right along with that, community service has always been in the center of everything I do. And in 2019, my wife and I, with a handful of Bahamians here in the Dallas area, we started a nonprofit organization called Igniting Our Nation Bahamas. We are registered in the state of Texas, and we have all of our licenses and registrations with the IRS. After in 2019, we were right in time for Hurricane Dorian, and we were able to send approximately $500,000 worth of medical supplies to the Rand Memorial in Grand Bahama. We were able to send a 53-foot container consisting of those medical supplies, as well as water, baby products, feminine products, a host of items into Grand Bahama. So at the same time, over the past few years, we've helped some of the local farms in Nassau. There's one farm in the Pinewood Community Farm. We were able to provide them with a certain amount of loads of topsoil just to get them a little above sea level. They were saying that every time it rains, the farm was flooded. So now we were able to help them with that. We had another farm that raises chickens. We were able to provide them with an incubator that can hatch out, 172 eggs at one time. At the same time, every year we give out 5 scholarships to students attending college throughout the world. There's no restrictions as to which college. We just ask that you are going to a higher level education. And this year, in recognition of the 50th anniversary, we will be giving out 4 $2,000 scholarships, and we will give 1 $5,000 scholarship in recognition of the 50th anniversary. As Igniting Our Nation Bahamas expands and attract more donors, we plan to increase both the size and amount of our scholarships. Our board is 100% volunteers, so we have very little overhead, and just about every dollar donated to the nonprofit organization is forwarded on to its allocated bucket. So that's me in a nutshell. I going 90-0 most days, and it's a lot of fun as a financial advisor. I take care of my clients from their retirement planning, college students planning, if they're planning to purchase a house, planning to purchase a vehicle, whatever their needs are. I work heavily with stocks, bonds, mutual funds, unit investment trust, all different types of investment vehicles. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Well, that's quite a nutshell, Mr. Mott. It's good to hear that you're doing well and making the contributions that you are making in our national development in the Bahamas and giving back, really. I think most Bahamians would tell you how grateful they are, especially what you did in the aftermath of Hurricane Dorian. But let's continue this conversation by getting your perspectives on how the Bahamas is perceived where you are, where you live. Since I've been here, I've heard nothing but good comments among fellow ambassadors from around the world of their perception and perspectives of the Bahamas. But Anne Bain, you have been away for a little while, and among people that you are in contact with, what do people say about your country, the Bahamas?
Great question. I definitely think most Americans think very, very positively of the Bahamas. I think because of like Carnival Cruise Lines and Virgin Cruise Lines, most people say, "Oh, the Bahamas! I've been there before. I've been there, Nassau, or the Bimini Islands." So it's definitely not unheard of, right? Many people know where I'm from. They can tell me about the straw market and how the water was so beautiful. And it's definitely looked at as a vacation destination. Nothing but positive comments, honestly. I don't think the Bahamas is known as anything other than a tourist spot, which is something that I think, shows like this can highlight, Bahamians in different capacities, not just tourism and hospitality. But I think overall, it's a very positive experience when you say I'm from the Bahamas and someone's excited to say, "Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about." So,
yes. And Mr. Davil, I believe that in your capacity as a travel specialist, you've been driving business to the Bahamas, eh?
Yes, and I get all different questions and complaints. Overall, it's positive. Some of the complaints I get, how expensive it is. Also, they're concerned. I just had a call actually not too long ago. My dentist asked, he goes pretty much every year, but his concern now is, and I guess on the internet you hear about the crime. And so I have to show him that, everything is fine. Mm-hmm. But you get the questions, is it safe? I had one the other day, wanted to know, can they walk from Paradise Island to downtown? And I said, yes, you can. It'll take you about 30, maybe 35 minutes, or you can take the ferry boat. So for me, I have to give them ease that everything is okay. I was home in December, and my concern is how, and maybe a lot of tourists will not see this, but I was just amazed at how congested it is to drive in Nassau. It just seems like, I don't know. But if we're gonna promote the Bahamas as a tourist spot, and it seems like that's like 70%, I think, of our business, we should do more to make it safer, but also cleaner. As I drove around, I've never seen so many old cars parked, look like they've been abandoned, and so things like that, if they, the government would clean it up, and I'm sure that they can do it to make it more attractive. And so, and then also, we have all the cruise ships that goes into Nassau. They're only there for the day. I don't know if there's any that stays overnight. And so I hope, or I wish somebody would ask, can they make it an overnight stay to give the tourists sometimes a better experience, as opposed to just that short period of time and they only can visit downtown Bay Street.
Okay. Well, there are a number of things that must be worked on, I'm sure. I tell people all the time that we are a nation in progress, and we have a number of islands that we are developing. And sometimes we look at New Providence as being the Bahamas, but it's just a small island, and we have to talk about developing the archipelago of the Bahamas and how I believe many of the islands are developing very nicely. But let's get some other perspectives of what people are saying. Debbie Ferguson, let's hear from you. Among people who you come in contact with?
Well, for the most part, being in Lexington, I think it's a little bit different. I get a mixture of both where, you know, a lot of them tell me it's my dream to one day visit the Bahamas. And some, they say, well, I've been to Exuma or I've been to Nassau. And so, you know, I'll always encourage the ones who said, look, that's the place to be. When you get there, don't worry about time. And it's like going to, you know, a family member. That's just how Bahamians are in period. So there's been several people who actually have visited since I've been here, and I'm hoping even more. I said it's always better when I'm there because I get to take you around and to see the Paradise Island, but also over the hill, you know, the out east or the out west. So definitely, I think trying to get more Lextonians to be able to be aware of, you know, and visit the Bahamas.
You know, I've said on several programs that growth is one thing and development is the next, and I'd like to get perspectives from you on how you view the development of the Bahamas, whether it's economic, social development, or otherwise. Pastor Pratt?
Yes, sir. So from the aspect of the Bahamas, I've been an ambassador from the aspect of sending as many people as I can to vacation, to see, to spend time from a religious aspect, churches, conventions. That has been my goal, to have individuals experience what I consider to be paradise on earth. Yes, there are some challenges that we have to deal with. Even recently, the last time I was home, I can see that. But, you know, as a nation, we're still developing. And we have to continue to keep our trust, I believe, and primary focus on God, and making sure that we continue to be that nation that lifts up and promotes God from that aspect. From a fraternity standpoint, I've had many of my fraternity brothers to show up, Masonic brothers. All of them have had great experiences, but it does not mean that, you know, word of mouth is one thing, but we have to continue to promote. And yes, I have seen some commercials advertising the Bahamas, but I think we can do a little bit more from an advertisement standpoint to reach certain areas that maybe be lacking right now. And the internet, of course, is always a great means, but just a commercial advertisement would help, I think, as well.
Mm-hmm. How are we developing, Mr. Mott?
From my standpoint, I think that from the development standpoint, there's quite a bit that we can push into. Being a financial advisor as well as a farmer, I like to look at the agricultural side of it. I'd like to see us, and I understand that we now have an individual who is really pushing forward into the farming aspect, the agricultural aspect. I would really like to see a whole lot more developing there. Back in 2018, I took a trip into Andros to Bamsey, and a beautiful setup. And I think their running at the time was on 100 acres, but I think they were only utilizing about 10 acres. they had a few rows of squash. And I was sharing with them, I said, the first time I learned of squash is when I came to Texas. I knew nothing about squash being in the Bahamas. And it's at the time, squash is not something that we have on our plates regularly, but here in America, it's a very big item. So I was sharing with them, I said, hey, you can go ahead and plant probably about 10 acres of squash. They grow fast, they're easy to deal with. And that's right there can be a very big export opportunity right there into Florida. So from an agricultural standpoint, there is a lot we can do. There's a lot we can branch off into. We have the land for it. We have the resources for it. And, with our proximity to the United States, there's so much that we can export, back onto agriculture. I go into the local grocery store, and when I go to pick up an avocado, there's these little itty bitty things that probably is this size. And I tell my wife, I'm like, man, I'm used to what we call them a pear, a big thing. And they grow readily. I remember as a kid, we had a tree right in the backyard. They grow readily in the Bahamas year round. So there's so much we can do and export to the United States. Back to your previous question, piggybacking some of the other panelists, a lot of my friends, they go down and they love the Bahamas, but the big complaint is the cost. And I expressed to them that, well, the cost is there because just about everything is imported. And you go into the grocery stores and you look, and we're importing these little itty bitty pears, avocados. And it boggles my mind. Why are we importing avocados from Mexico when we can grow those great big old avocados? So from an agricultural standpoint, there's so much we can do. There's so much potential that we have in the country. We have so many. I've talked to different farmers and different people in agriculture who they're ready to do, they want to do, and there's so much potential we have that we are not harnessing and we're not pushing into. So that continues to boggle my mind a bit. It always has. It continues to today as to why we are importing bananas. Why are we importing bananas? Why are we importing so much of the things that we're importing? And we have so much land that is just sitting there that no one is utilizing.
Mr. Mott, we live in Hurricane Alley. And, many of the farmers will tell you that they've been discouraged by the destruction of so many farms over the last 10 years or so due to these vicious hurricanes that have been passing through the Bahamas. That is one of the reasons why there's been a decline in agricultural output in the Bahamas. But the potential is there to do all of the things that you are suggesting, no doubt. And we have to continue encouraging farmers to persevere and to, despite the climatic conditions, climate change, to be involved in agricultural pursuits. But Mr. Woodside, how are we growing and developing in the Bahamas from your perspective?
I was having a very recent conversation about Andros in particular, and going back to the tourism industry in relation to that, because I had a few questions asked of me. That's the biggest island. And yes, we have the marshes and we have Ortec on one side, but we don't have the development comparatively, if you will, in that island. By the way, my family's from Andros, so let me throw that out there real quickly. But the question came up because someone was trying to buy property in this side because they wanted to go and spend more time in the Bahamas. So they're an American, where they wanted the rest and relaxation, but didn't want the hustle and bustle of Nassau. And they've been to Nassau, they've been to Freeport, if you will, but just wanted a more laid back life. And we discussed Andros and we discussed Abaco. So I think one of the things that we've made a lot of progress, and we still have more to go. But if we can develop more rest and relaxation, slower pace opportunities on our family islands, I think we have a great opportunity in front of us for the future. And those were recent conversations about both islands and what individuals are looking for as far as the development of the country. Going back to the first question, if you will, the perspective is high, the perspective is positive, the perspective is good. From this area, and we're close to the Bahamas, but here locally, we have enough Bahamians where at different events, and I'm going to tell you, non-Bahamian events, there's junking, and individuals enjoy the junking, individuals enjoy the crack conch, if you will, and like the Bahamian getting together and what they bring to those local events from a cultural perspective. So the look of the and pride of the Bahamas is there. The perspective of individuals seeing it is there, and individuals enjoy it tremendously. The whole Bahamian culture, and we just got to continue to work to develop small segments at a time, so that we can add to it where we can expand, not just in Nassau, but I think develop more of the outer islands for long term.
Well said. As we talk about the 50th anniversary of the Bahamas, we can say over the last 50 years that we have educated a whole lot of people who are making significant contributions around the world. They have many Bahamians have become global citizens, and I just want you to ponder what some Bahamians ask all the time, and they ask the question: well, why is did Debbie Ferguson choose to stay in the United States? Or why is Pastor Pratt pastoring in Virginia? Why is Mr. Mott in Texas? And the list goes on and on. Why is Mr. Davil operating his business out of Texas? And perhaps you can give the answer to Bahamians who want to know why this country, the United States, held you so long. Let's begin with Debbie Ferguson.
Okay, so as far as for myself, I retired in 2013, and ultimately, honestly, I wanted to stay home. My mom is there, my husband is there, and so I went home and was trying to figure out how can I contribute now that I've retired. What can I do? And honestly, my asking wasn't that huge. I didn't care. I just wanted to be home, and unfortunately, I couldn't find a job. And so it just went where 2 weeks after I literally was looking, the coach at Southern Miss literally texted me and said, we're looking for a coach. And so I was like, wow, this just has to be God. And I was like, that was it. I decided, well, if I can't get a job at home, I will go ahead and go to Mississippi and start my coaching career. And that's how it all started. Nothing against being at home. It's always, a place of peace for me and returning to all that. But that's what started my journey here in the U.S.
Okay, Pastor Pratt.
I believe God has a purpose and a plan for each and every one of us, and our destiny is already lined out. But as Ms. Ferguson stated, you never forget your roots, and you always provide a means of support. I'm in daily contact with some of my brothers of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated in the Bahamas, Brother Ricardo DeVoe and others, and providing means of ways of support on how we can help develop and maintain the Bahamas. So while I may not physically be there, I am attached, and I am constantly praying for my family members that are back home. You never forget where you come from. And that has always been my strong point, that, you know, I came from a place of a strong religious upbringing, which is still there. And I came from a place where family was a priority, which is still there. And as Ms. Ferguson has alluded to, we end up having kids, and we get developed, and we end up in industry, and we continue our lives, and but we never forget where we come from.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Bain?
Hey, great question. I definitely, I was telling the other panelist earlier that I'm just visiting here. So I think what happens a lot of the time too, for people kind of my generation, so millennial, Gen X, so you go off to school, and you begin adulthood in the country, right? So whether it's the US, UK, Canada. And so, you know, by the time you finish undergrad, grad, all of your adult life has been in this place that's not home, you know? And so that's really all you know as an adult. And sometimes it's just easier. Change is always hard, right? So transitioning to something which is home and familiar, but transitioning back as an adult can sometimes be more challenging than just going back home. Than just staying where you're at. You know, you already have an apartment, you already have like your friend group, and you're comfortable. I think that's something that I recognize why a lot of people end up kind of staying where they're at, especially in maybe not so much the US because the visa process is a bit harder, but like in Canada, where, you know, once you've done undergrad there, it's kind of like it's set in stone, right? So you can just get a job and continue life as it was. I think too, something that Debbie alluded to earlier is that opportunity, right? So I think in the Bahamas, and this can piggyback on our initial conversation on just diversifying our economy. In the Bahamas, the majority of jobs are tourism based, or maybe at a financial institution, or maybe
or
like
in the medical profession as well.
So I am a great example, right? So the training that I have, a great example, actually, a personal example. So I want to be home more than anything. And I remember I was like a third or fourth year in my program, and my mom came to visit me, and I brought her to my lab. And I was like, yeah, mom, this is what I was doing, I was setting the stuff up. And she was just like, wow, this is crazy. I don't know what you were doing, Nassau. And I was like, yeah, I don't know either, but you know, this is what I'm doing. And so for me, at least, that my training was so specific that if I want to go home, and so my job right now is exactly what I did in grad school, except that plus more, right? And so my training works really well for like the industry that I'm in right now. The Bahamas doesn't have those types of industries in place, right? And so I can definitely go home and start that. Or, which is easier for me right now, I can just transition to start my career where it's already established, where all I can do is just kind of learn, as opposed to if I go back to Nassau right now, I would definitely have to kind of carve that out for myself. It wouldn't be something that I could easily just walk into, you know? And I feel like a lot of Bahamians who didn't take maybe like a finance degree or become an MD or hospitality feel like, you know, it's really hard to find something where they're paid adequately and where they can find longevity in a career in the Bahamas, especially if you want to be like, I want to be in Nassau or I want to be at this particular island, right? So I think that's a big challenge that we're not addressing.
Okay. Let's talk about the pace of growth, because sometimes people decide that they would live outside the Bahamas because the pace of growth and development might be a little too slow. Is that your thinking?
Pretty much, you're hitting the nail on the head. You know, when I came to Texas back in 1998, there was no plan on staying here long term. It was get in, get my degree, get out. Even when I met my now wife at the time, I informed her, hey, I'm not staying here. So, move accordingly. And when we got married, we had a plan to spend 5 years at one country and then spend 5 years at another country. It just so happened we spent our first 5 years in Texas. And at the end of that, when we went home to do our second 5 years, just like Ms. Debbie said, I went into the Ministry of Works. And now understand, I'm 5 years as a design engineer. You go into Ministry of Works and they're telling you that at the time that they might be able to pay you $30,000 a year. Now I'm coming home with a wife, with a kid, with nothing. I'm starting from scratch and I'm being offered maybe $30,000 a year. So that's the numbers just does not work. And to piggyback with Mr. Pratt, home is our first love. Even though we are here, there's so much we still do to work with back home. Right now, we have started, we're in the process of building a home in Cat Island. We've spent 1 week in Cat Island where we did Vacation Bible School in Bennett's Harbor. We had, each day we had about 50 kids from the settlement who came, where we went and we picked up kids from Orange Creek all the way down to Thurston Hill. And we spent a week with those kids. We had a blast, and we culminated the week where we took them all down into the south, and we took them to Como Hill, and we took them all the way to Devil's Point. We took them all over the island because we know my mom was from Cat Island. And it saddened me when I spoke with her that when I went to Cat Island as an adult, I think in 2016, and I took her to Devil's Point, that was her very first time being at Devil's Point, being that far in the south. So I said, well, kids in the north don't get to the south, and kids in the south don't get to the north. So we took the kids all over the island. So we do a lot in the Bahamas. We give back a lot, and with the nonprofit organization we started, Igniting Our Nation Bahamas, we do a lot. But the big hurdle for myself and a lot of Bahamians graduating college and excited to return home is just the pay scale, the opportunities. Again, with Dr. Bain saying you're so specific in what you're doing. You have to remember at the time, my plan and what I was working on was application specific integrated circuits. There's no way in the Bahamas I can design a chip, sure. So it made it to where as much as I wanted to be home with all my heart, there was no, financially, it was impossible.
Mm-hmm. Well, I get that. And there are many professions that in many professions, people say that the opportunities are just not available for them in the Bahamas, because if you are a nuclear physicist, there's no space for you in the Bahamas. Isn't that right, Dr. Pratt? So you would have to be in a country where there's a nuclear plant, or where you are able to practice your craft. Yes?
So what I would like to propose is one day they may evaluate. We have small modular reactors that are being developed now that are not on the scale of a nuclear power plant that I work at, but can still produce enough electricity to power thousands of homes. And it's a safer model. It's something that is portable. So the Bahamian government may want to take a look at small modular reactors instead of just oil and gas.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about our social development. We can run out of time here because I'd like to engage you on a variety of issues. Mr. Dava, I begin this segment with you as we talk about our social development, how we are developing from your perspective as a people. A nation is made up of people, and we're talking about the character of a people. Let's talk a little bit about our social development and how we are developing as a people.
Well, my concern is we have about 80,000 kids, from 0 to 14 right now, that I'm concerned about what's their future. I think what's happening right now is a lot of, due to the internet, a lot of information is out there that the kids are following. And I think from back home and based on the way I was brought up, they've lost the respect for elders. And I think that's why we're in the situation that we're in now back home with some of the issues that are going on. But I'm concerned about what the government is doing to help the kids. You have students who are looking for jobs. The unemployment rate is high, 12%. The pay scale is low. I think the pay scale, I guess they call it the work pay should be $500. I think right now it's like $250 or $260 a week. And
you mean minimum wage you're talking about?
Yes, but also I think they look at it as how much they paid a week. Okay. And I think right now it's like maybe $260 a week is the average or the norm, and I think it should be raised. And so we have a lot of things that are going on that when I go home or when I talk to my family, I'm concerned about their development as far as how they're doing things. They're surviving. I hear of the petty crime. People are having to steal food, and it shouldn't have to be, But what do we do? Who is at fault, or how do they get help? Here, I try to help the students that are here in school that need assistance. I'll try to help them, but I also say, how can we help back home? I don't know what the answer is. Who do we go to? How do we propose? One thing I wanted to address, I've asked. I think when Minnis visited Houston, I asked him, I said, is there a list of Bahamians abroad with this that we can call on if there is a need back home? We should have a list, or they should have a list to say, here is a position that is opening up or is open. Where can we find a Bahamian to fill these positions, as opposed to giving out work permits for foreigners to come in? And that's my concern. When you, getting back to the previous question is, when you're here and you've established yourself and you're making a decent living, it's hard to go back home and say, well, I can do this and I can do that. When I worked in the hotel business with Wyndham, they sent me back, they sent me to Nassau to be the financial controller for the Ambassador Beach. Well, when I got there, the people they didn't, first I said I was a Bahamian. They didn't believe I was a Bahamian. How did you get this position? And then I tried to teach them or train them to prepare themselves for higher positions, because working in the hotel business or in that position, they would work in one position for 20 years and doing the same thing. And I said, what about, being cross-trained so you can be more marketable? They didn't know that they can do that, but the person that was in charge, who was a foreigner, they weren't looking out for their benefit.
Yeah.
And
but all of this has to do, Mr. David, I think, with the pace of development in our country. And I believe quite often, sometimes we we tend to have a comparison between cities or states in the United States with the Bahamas, and sometimes the comparison is not very fair, because, as I mentioned, we are a country, we are a work in progress, a nation in progress, and there are a number of shortcomings. There are a number of opportunities that are available in the United States that are simply just not available in the Bahamas. And so we are at this juncture of our development, educating people really for the world, and not just for the Bahamas. You are a person who is being educated to participate wherever you are in the world, because based on the size of our population, the rate of growth in our country, the opportunities will simply not be there for the number of trained Bahamians who are getting higher education, not only in the United States and Canada, but around the world. But when I talk about our social development, you mentioned crime a couple of times, Mr. Darwin. There's crime in every city in the United States. And sometimes I believe the level of crime in the Bahamas is exaggerated, simply because we look at the Bahamas as being New Providence. We are Nassau-centric in so many ways. There are so many islands of the Bahamas where there is absolutely no crime at all. No crime to talk about. So that, in terms of our social development, are we developing the rate of social development or the quality of life? Those are the kind of issues I want you to address. In terms of quality of life, not necessarily standard of living, because the standard of living in Houston, Texas, will obviously be a little higher than it is in many places in the Bahamas. But quality of life, let's hear you all on that particular issue.
Well, the quality of life, let me address my concern there. I just lost my sister and a niece, and that was primarily because of the lack of health care that was being offered to them at the hospital. And I've heard so many different stories about, people checking into Princess Margaret Hospital and not checking out.
That happens all over the world.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know what the reason is, and I don't want to be too defensive of the Princess Margaret Hospital, right? But I'll tell you that in terms of quality of doctors, in terms of the trained professionals, there are many physicians in the United States who question sometimes why Bahamians would come to some places in the United States when there's a cadre of well-qualified, well-trained physicians in the Bahamas.
But then it goes back to cost. You can go to Princess Margaret Hospital for treatment, and if you're lucky, I mean, you'll be there for 2-3 days before you get someone to see you. But then if you go to the doctor's hospital, you've got to have at least $5,000 to start to get that treatment.
Yes. Yes.
So, I mean, it's...
No, but you see, we ought to realize that in the Bahamas, the quality of care will not be what I can get at your top hospital in Texas or in Virginia or Florida. So there are limitations. Yes, we agree to that, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, Debbie?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Of course. I just want to say, as far as agreeing with everybody on the panel, and everybody's experience is going to be different. But I remember as a little girl, growing up where certain things wasn't available, and now going back and as an adult looking back at things, and okay, still not as we would like it to be best, but it has some improvement. And healthcare, even with the new facility that's being built at the Princess Margaret Hospital, like that's really nice to see. That's a progress. Yes, there's a difference between going to, Doctor's Hospital and Princess, but we're hoping, as far as we're focusing on progress, and whether it's small progress, it's still progress. And I think I remember somebody saying about the abandoned vehicles, and I actually remember at one point they cleaned it up. But maybe now again, you still have people who come back and they'll leave the abandoned cars. Just like the same, I'm a big advocate for animals. At one point, the Human Society was doing great with neutering and spaying animals, and now there's a whole plethora of animals on the island, especially in Nassau, like running the streets, who need care. And so I've seen progress, and with everything else, like it falls and it inclines. And I've seen social development in the sports section where, the Popeye Bowl with football, and then basketball tournaments there, and being able to see Coach Yolet with their teams going to Nassau. And just recently, Kentucky wasn't able to attend. However, in Freeport, Grand Bahama, you had several colleges actually attend, spring break there to, attend spring break, and they put on a meet. So trying to help the economy there. So there's some stuff being done. Ain't never perfect, but I tend to give thanks for the small things that's going on and progressing.
What do you say, Mr. Woodside, because of proximity to the United States of America, that the expectation of the Bahamians might be a little too high?
It is easy to have that high expectation because I'm going to say television, social media. But the one defining thing I can say for all of us, and probably every successful Bahamian that is in any country outside of the Bahamas, is they have a deep-rooted, I want to say, culture to be successful, to succeed. They have a good understanding of their culture, and they have pride in the Bahamas. So that for me, if I think about that social development and trying to increase the individual's opportunity to be successful, is making sure that that pride is continuing to be instilled, that work ethic is continuing to be distilled in everyone. Celebrating this 50 years of I'm going to tell you, independence, if you will. I can think where I was July 10th at Clifford Park in the Boy Scouts. I got to shake the hands of Prince Charles, or King Charles now, and how much pride I had as an individual in our country moving forward to this next phase of who we are. And I think we need to continue that development. Debbie, I saw those banners for the teams going to Freeport last week because I was in Nassau, and it filled me with pride. Okay, yes, we have those 6 teams coming, and we need to make sure our youth continue to see that, to understand that, and that they can achieve and be successful. And we'll have the necessary social development if we keep that focus on them. And I wish I could say, yeah, get rid of trying to be like an American, trying to be like a Canadian, but trying to be like a Bahamian. Because even when I went home, and everyone's different, they'd be absolutely right. I want to count salad, count fritters, crack count, peas and rice, macaroni and cheese, and I want to go to fish fry every day to hang out with my people. I didn't get to the Junkanoo, but it was timing. But that's what will keep us solid. That's what will keep us moving forward. If we keep that type of development and pride in our country and nation, where we want to be those people, that people every day.
Interesting points you raised, Mr. Woodside, and I just wonder whether we are doing the kind of job that we ought to be doing as a nation to imbue a sense of nationalism in our youth. You talked about where you were on July 10th, 1973. I was a young reporter back then, and we have seen the level of progress that our country has made over the 50 years. But there's something called cultural imperialism, and the extent to which young, impressionable Bahamians understand what it means to be Bahamian. And because, again, of our proximity to the United States, we are importing a whole lot of habits, good and bad. And as one of our former politicians said in one of his writings, that we have seen the coarsening of our society, especially among young men. The question is, how do we do this? How do we imbue a sense of nationalism and keep the Bahamian identity with our people? Because all of you here, whether you're in Indiana or Virginia or Texas or Florida, you are still very much Bahamian. And I know that there's no place like home. Isn't that right? How do we keep this, Mr. Mott, this Bahamian identity strong among our youth?
I'm sorry, I was still muted. As a few of the panelists have expressed, and I saw the change coming in as a teenager with the big rain-catching satellite dishes. You all remember those? And we had as a kid, I remember having the Christian Council. The Christian Council would screen what movies came at the theaters, and they would screen out a whole lot of the I guess, socially non-qualified movies and items. But with the introduction of the satellite dish, the cable TVs, that just pretty much pulled the fangs out of the Christian Council, pulled the teeth of the Christian Council, where nothing was the gate was busted wide open. So that right there is a challenge where individuals could now sit in the comfort of their own living rooms and be exposed to whatever madness is out there in the world. So right now it's going to be a pretty big challenge. And I would say from the sporting arena, getting the kids involved in sports. I have a friend of mine who is heavily involved in sports, and getting the government, NGOs, other entities who can provide the youth with the tools that they need. Because I know a buddy of mine who's involved with the kids. He's talked about kids coming to the tournaments without tennis shoes, coming to the tournaments without proper gear and clothing. So all of these things, once we can help provide those things, will bring the kids together. And I think that the synergy that they will get from that, and a big part of what I talk about all the time, is exposure. A lot of the kids, if they get the proper exposure to things, to opportunities for them to advance, whether it be sports, whether it be STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, there's so much that we can do. And a part of that will feed into our culture, because now the kids would be focusing on positives as opposed to the bunch of garbage that they grab off of the TV screen and off of the satellite dishes. So I guess cable now, I'm starting to date myself talking about satellite dishes. But that's what I would say is getting the kids involved, as Mr. Pratt talked about Boys Brigade. I know that every week, we went to Boys Brigade. At Boys Brigade, we were taught, we were taught Bible, but we were also taught about the Bahamas and what, the national symbols, the flag, the fish, the flower. A lot of these things, a lot of the youth growing up now, they're just so caught up in Hollywood that that's what they're chasing. And once we can bring the kids, zone them in on the positives. As I stated before, my family and I, we went to Cat Island. We spent a week with the kids doing Vacation Bible School, having the time to sit down and talk to the kids. And the young teenage men, they were all excited about getting a Honda because all the big drug dealers, I guess, were getting Hondas, and just talking with them and stepping them through. So if more, and we lean heavily on government, but then not just government, we all have a part to play, because when we look at government is just a representation of the people. So when we start labeling the issues in government, we're just labeling the issues of the population. And if we can collectively say, to be a little cliche-ish, I believe the children are the future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. And so much of the teaching I see has been lost and left behind. So many of the adults who should be in a teaching role are not. So many of the programs that should be there for the youth are not. So the kids with the emptiness and the blindness, they do shift over to the Hollywood. They do shift over to the movies and thinking that we can do what they're doing in the movies. We can live lives of the Hollywood rock stars, all of these reality TV shows that are, just impractical and unrealistic. So that's what I would say is, as a nation, if we can say offer more opportunities for our youth for things to do, taking them different places, doing different things, and not leaving the country, but within the island itself. As I said, when we came, we took the kids from the north and took them to the south, where they've never been and never seen, and there's so many of the other islands that we can take kids. Back in September, October, I had my kids down in Exuma. We went from Barry Tari all the way to Santa Ana, and we went from point to point. And again, same thing there. There are kids up in Barry Tari. Probably the farthest they might have been is to Georgetown, and they haven't been past Georgetown. So giving the youth the exposure would give them more of a national pride and more of they don't need the American way, And when I go home, I've been in the U.S. since 1998, and I'm 1989. And when I go home, people are still like, "Oh, but you still talk the same." And I'm like, "Well, I know who I am." Guys come over Friday evening and leave Saturday evening, and then all of a sudden they got this, ghetto hip hop American thing, and I'm like, "What are you guys doing? Don't you guys know who you are?" So, and if folks lose track of who they are, they will become whatever.
Dr. Bain, let's talk about that Bahamian identity thing and how we maintain that identity and what we should be about to instill pride, national pride in our youth in particular.
I think it's a really complex question, I feel as though, like for me, I feel very nationalistic, right? Like I was a Bahamian born, bred, did. That's how I feel. But I feel that a lot of it came from my personal upbringing, like my mom and my daddy. And even at school, I feel like it was such a big thing that, like, I'm proud to be a Bahamian. And I don't know if that's being done anymore. I don't know, as in I really don't know, not as in I doubt I doubt it's being done, but I really don't know. I feel as though, as the other panelists have mentioned, giving these children opportunities to kind of see Bahamians doing big things, see Bahamians doing things that they could aspire to. I think like programs like this could be so influential, but I think that's hard. Like, how do you bring nationalism to the youth? I think that's a great question. I think that's $1 million question, honestly. I wish I can give a better I wish I can give a better answer, but I think it's the upbringing. I think it's the environment, the people who they're around, the people they surround themselves with. Yeah.
Debbie
Because I
Ferguson.
feel like,
Mhm.
sorry.
Debbie
Yeah, because I
Ferguson,
feel like Debbie.
you feel, go on, Dr. Bain.
Go ahead, Dr. Bain, finish. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, because I feel like, growing up, being a Bahamian is my best quality. You know what I mean? So to have that being and to see that it seems that it's being lost, it's sad, but I don't really know how to fix it, So, sorry.
I think like most of you, we are all Bahamian ambassador and we take that seriously. And I think being in the college system, being a coach where, we've also given scholarships to Bahamian young people who are athletes. Yes. They've gotten it via of their talent. And I've seen it where they would come to college here in the US and it still spin back around where there was one young lady at Southern Miss who actually got her degree in medicine and she wanted to become a doctor. But we still go back to the same thing we talked about where she wanted to go home and to be able to use that degree and become a doctor at home. But the same issue where, okay, for some reason, I don't know why, for some reason, there was an opportunity there for her to return and be able to work in that field. I don't know what the reason was, but it seems that there's that gap where, individuals, I know as Bahamians, they go off to get their degree in whatever it may be, but some do get in the hospitality and in the financial department, and of course in tourism, but there are other fields where it's not so readily available. And I think we got to know the problem, that is the problem, and be able to fix that loophole and fix that gap where it doesn't matter what profession you are, being able to come back home. That's what they want to do first and foremost, to have the opportunity to go home and to make the Bahamas even better.
Let's hear from Mr. Darwell as we wind up our program. We want to have comments from all of you. It has been such a privilege to speak with Bahamians from various cities in the United States, and we're going to continue this as we move into celebrating our Golden Jubilee. Mr. Darwell, let's talk about the kind of Bahamas that you envision, and I'm going to ask you all the same thing. Your aspirations for the Bahamas as we move forward.
I would like to see the government have more faith in its people. I don't think we honor our people the way we should. I think we give opportunities to more foreigners than we do to Bahamians. Speaking of someone wanting to go home and they can't find a job, but if you go home and if you look to see who is holding a position in a company, they're foreigners. And my question is, why can't a Bahamian go home and get that job? They're giving work permits, and I'm only going to speak for what I know in the hospitality industry. When I was in Nassau working at the hotel, they brought in a food and beverage director who happened to be a foreigner, and I worked with people in the industry in Nassau who are experienced. They're training this foreigner, but he's the boss. And my question is, how do you fix that? Well, I ask, when you give a work permit to a foreigner, is something attached to that to say, okay, we will issue you the work permit, but however, within 1 year or 2 years, or whatever the case may be, you're responsible for training a Bahamian to take that position, so that other Bahamians can look and say, oh, I would like to be able to do that because there's a Bahamian holding that position. Why do we have so many people who are in mid-management that are foreigners and not Bahamians?
Okay, all right, thank you. We go to Mr. Mark, your aspirations for the Bahamas. Just give me a minute.
But my aspiration for the Bahamas, again, the big word is exposure. I believe that as a people, government and people, we're stuck in a colonialistic mindset to where the masses are governed by a few. And what we see is the wealth, and it's around the world, but even more so in the Bahamas, where the wealth is held in the hands of a few, and the whole masses just trudge along day by day. As to your prior question, the quality of life. Well, if all you're used to is getting peanut butter and bread every day, you think that's the world. You know, no one has exposed you to anything else. So I believe that as a people, my aspirations for us is to stop looking at party politics and for us to move to where we can say we are trying to advance the country as a whole, not just whatever acronym your political party is affiliated with. Because as myself, say back in 2018, when I went to Barnsley, I was very curious about coming to the Bahamas with a herd of cattle, and it did not work. And now I'm getting the phone calls, but my concern is, okay, we do this thing, and in 5 years, government change, then now I'm left holding the bag. So we can shift from party politics and take care of the country. More and more Bahamians can say, well, hey, I can invest into the country because I know that in 5 years, my business is not subjected to the new party.
Thank you, Mr. Woodside.
Well, I'm going to say I have a few words in 30 seconds or less.
Yes.
And I'm going to talk about opportunity and development where, as Mr. Mott said earlier, where we are more self-sustaining across different industries, where we're not depending, as we've been looking at, tourism. And then, again, taking advantages of opportunities, and as opportunities come about, that we can be better, more efficient in the Bahamas as a country for the greater good of all individuals. And then clean it up. Real simple. I was walking downtown, and I'll share this story real quick, where last week, small paper bag, plastic bag, where I'm picking up stuff and putting it in a plastic bag as I was walking around town because I didn't like it. So yeah, we need to clean up our islands.
All right, I have 30 seconds for each of the ladies, and then another 30 seconds for Pastor Pratt. So let's begin with Dr. Bain. Your aspirations for the Bahamas moving forward.
Definitely a diversified economy. I think that would attract and maintain a lot of the Bahamian population. 10 seconds, so.
Okay. Lady Ferguson, Mackenzie.
I agree with Dr. Bain as far as, bring some diversification, of course, not just tourism, and expand as far as Mr. Mott said, if we can with the agriculture, et cetera, but I think everything is going to go through education. I still have a relationship with my grade 6 teacher. She was one of the best, Miss Sherilyn Anderson. And I think, she was one of those where she taught. There's a professor now at Harvard University, and he came from Oxford Primary. He's actually an economics professor at Harvard. And we just got to get back. Everything is through education and trying to figure out, if I see him becoming a professor at Harvard, that means I can do that, but not just in the US, but also becoming a professor in the Bahamas. I just want to say I think it was last year in November at Breezers, And I sat and I saw a nurse and maybe some doctors, and I asked them where they were from. And they said they're actually from Cuba, and they were actually here working, in the Bahamas. And I think if our kids don't see those, there's some who are Bahamians who are doctors, but need more kids to see that, and see the different, job or career that they can actually do and dream and become. If they don't see it or they're not close to it, and I'm talking about the average Bahamian, then they won't be able to dream and go after it. So hopefully we could get to that point. And
very good. Very good. Thank you. Dr. Pratt, we give you the last word.
Yes, sir. I can't even take my text in 30 seconds, but, I started at Shell Bahamas Limited, working there as a junior accountant when I was at College of the Bahamas. And that was a great opportunity because I was exposed to something that I had not seen. So exposure is definitely the key. We have to be intentional in our actions too. I know we have a lot of discussions and we talk about things, but we need to take action, have action items and due dates and who is going to do what by when. So my motto is also always be intentional and make sure you make every action count. So the Bahamas will have to be greater with their innovation. Advancements, looking at data centers, looking at investments, looking at agriculture as we talked about, but definitely don't forget fisheries. That's a great thing that we sometimes forget about. So there are ways that we can, but exposure to the kids, give them the opportunity to see what can be done, see who's doing what, spend some time with those that are in power, and we can make a better Bahamas.
Thank you. I thank you all very much.
Better in the Bahamas, sir. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you for participating in this webinar today. It has been my pleasure to speak with you, and we are going to continue these webinars as we move into the 50th anniversary of our great country, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you so very much.